our presentation, there's a lot of folks doing presentations regarding opiate abuse. We fused our presentation with faith for the simple reason that in many cases, faith will help you do the necessary things that you have to do in order to deal with opiate abuse. So that's why what we do is centered around faith, and that's going to help us be successful with your help. Our next presenter is Mr. Doug Larson, and Doug has also been with us from day one. Doug is a member of All Saints Lutheran Church, and unfortunately he lost a son to opiate abuse. Doug?
Thanks, Fred. Thank you, first of all, for everybody coming here on a Saturday. I appreciate it. The program that I'm going to talk, first I'd like to just mention my son. That's the reason they have me in this program, is I've gone through this 24/7 nightmare that a lot of families go through, trying to deal with saving the life of someone they care about. My son, I have a picture of him there for a reason. He had he was diagnosed with what they call body dysmorphia. He was convinced that he was terrible looking. He was 6'2" to 6'3", trim, had his own 3,000 square foot house, and was quite successful. And he just thought every girl that looked at him was repulsed and every guy that looked at him wanted to fight. It's a disease called body dysmorphia. It's just one of the many things that creates this beginning desires for these addictions. A lot, in all the different people I've talked to at the Salvation Army, I've done programs with Fred here, and almost every addict I've talked to has had one thing in common, and that is that they wanted to feel different. Something was bothering them, and they needed something to get them going. And that's what I feel happened to my son. He just had this disease. We couldn't convince him any different. And we were stuck. What we're going to discuss today is, I'm going to have to look at it here, but we're going to discuss the opiates, how it's abused, how big the problem is, and how did we get here. When we started this program about 3 years ago or so, it's changed. It's changed a lot. It was heroin overdoses that we talked about, and people were dying from overdosing, from drug addictions. Now it's getting to where people that are using the fentanyl has turned the whole thing around. Fentanyl is a much cheaper way for them to produce this stuff, and so it's out there a lot. And these pills that you buy, a lot of them have, they predict that about 45% of all the pills you buy on the street that are not made in a pharmacy have a lethal dose of fentanyl in them. Because they're made in a garage, they're made in a cartel, they're made somewhere, but they're not made in a lab, so you don't know what's in them. But this is an epidemic. We have a video there I can't show because the system, pardon me? About 40 to 45% of the pills you buy on the street. Actually, almost all of them are made with fentanyl. It's just that's the percentage they've come up with that are lethal, have a lethal hit. What happened, well, I'll get into that in just a moment. The first video I was going to show you is just a simple, about a 2-minute video on how easy it is to get heroin and to get these pills for the people that are looking for them on the street. When my son was in the Salvation Army for his first time there, when he left, there was people walking around the Salvation Army trying to sell drugs to those people leaving the building. They were all ready for you. These are the different opiates. You've got synthetic and you've got generic. Obviously, the far left picture there is a picture of a poppy plant, and then the different drugs that are illegal. Fentanyl, however, when made in a lab, is a legal drug and is useful for someone with a serious medical problem like back injury or something like that, where they actually really do need help. But this is the chemical makeup of the opiates, and you can see that heroin and codeine and oxycodone are virtually the same thing. Most all the opiates are very, very similar in their chemical makeup. This is kind of how it starts. Like Reverend Tina mentioned, you start out maybe with just a pill that you took because the doctor recommended it. When my son broke his wrist when he was about 13, We went to the doctor. I was a single parent at that time. He said give him Percocet. He gave him the prescription. It was a doctor. I didn't know. I assumed he knew exactly what he was talking about, and that may be where it started. We don't actually know that, but that was his first time ever having one. Then you can take these pills. Most of them are time release, and you can crush them, and then you can snort or smoke them. And if you do that, you bypass the time release, and you get a much stronger hit suddenly. And then the quickest way is injecting. And if you inject it, it's in your blood system immediately, and that is another high risk on the street. A friend of mine lost her son to a disease called sepsis. He was using on the street, and he was in California. When they finally found him, he was in the hospital in California. He lived for 42 days in the ICU, and she lost, his name is Brandon. Her name is Rhonda. She still lives with that, and he passed away about the same time my son did. And she lives with that like the rest of us parents who've lost a child. She'll never get over it. But the state of California paid for 42 days of an ICU for him, so they put a lot of money into trying to save him. This is, it also, you're talking about hepatitis C, these kind of things with the dirty needles. But it's fentanyl that is really causing the problem now. In a lot of cases, they're not saying people are overdosing. Now they're saying people are being poisoned. Because you're going out there and you're taking a pill, you're not expecting it to be what it is, but it says Percocet or it says Xanax, but it's not. It's been made in a lab or in a garage somewhere. This is why they start using, well, basically like with an over, you take the medication, and an opiate medication is one that once you start taking it, you need more to get the same feeling. So if you're taking one pill the first few days, you may need 2 to get the same feeling. By the end of a couple weeks, you may be taking 4 or 5 pills 3 or 4 times a day. And then what happens is if you still want that medication, you try to doctor shop maybe. And that's getting tougher and tougher because it's becoming electronic where you can't just take a paper in. And so they know. So then you go to the street. And again, then you're messing with drugs that are not going to be safe for you to take, even if you're a user that's got a lot of tolerance. This is why they keep using it again. This is the withdrawals. This is when you develop the tolerance to it and you decide to quit. The withdrawals, the physical withdrawals from heroin is only about 3 days, 3 or 4 days, but they're very miserable days. They're described as being about like 100 times worse than the worst case of the flu. Because when you take an opiate, it affects it attaches to your brain, it attaches to your gastrointestinal tract and your back. So when you're withdrawing from an opiate, it's kicking into all those areas. And I think everybody here knows when your stomach isn't right, you're not right. So it is a real tough time, but the emotional withdrawal is pretty much forever. You'll always remember that. They call it chasing the high. Somebody gets that good feeling the first time they use an opiate and it makes them feel great and they're relaxed and they're comfortable. They try to get that again, but they never do. But they're chasing the high. This is
what you're saying is they never get that initial feeling.
They don't get the initial feeling again. Not the same. They're just trying. They're going for it. That's what they call it. That's why they call it chasing the high. This would be the second video. I'm sorry these aren't playing, but there's a guy named Nacho, and he just basically describes what it's like to go through the withdrawals, and he starts using again, and he goes through the withdrawals, and he's trying, and he describes how tough it is to do it, but he can't help himself from doing it. I'm going to bypass that because we can't hear it. How big the problem is? Well, if you look at this, I did put out a couple of flyers here that I want everyone maybe to take, if you would, before you leave. On the front of both of these is a couple of QR codes. You can just scan those and it'll bring you to help for if you have a family member that's in trouble, or, and I can't explain this clear enough, if you have someone that's going through this, it is a 24/7 nightmare. And they got another one's called PAL Group, and they will help people that are going through this. They'll give you some advice on what to do to survive through this problem. But if you notice there, in 2020, we had 48,000 deaths from overdoses. Now they're putting fentanyl not only in heroin, but fentanyl is also in cocaine, it's in methamphetamines, and it's the death toll last year in 2021, for the first time ever in the history of the country, went over 100,000. There's 107,000 people that died in 2021 from overdoses, or what a lot of people are calling now is poisoning from this now. So it's closer to 300 a day now. Actually, I think the figure is 294 a day in this country. This just shows that from March 2020 to March 2021, 97,000 people died from overdoses. It's just going through the problem. This is Arizona, and that's the main thoroughfares of drugs through the cartels coming into the United States. And I just heard the other day that Arizona, out of all 50 states, is the worst state for fentanyl right now in the country. So we've got it basically everywhere here. And the cost, this cost figure is way off now. I mean, they estimated it for 2021 at $1 trillion, but they also estimated about 60,000 deaths. It was more than double that. So the cost, and this cost is all just tax money, so we don't really feel that ourselves individually. But it doesn't include the cost that parents pay for their children to go into a program. I know from my first 30 days with my son, I paid $8,000 down and $1,800 a month for 8 months for 30 days. And it was almost like a resort. It didn't really help. Once you get there, it's tough. But it doesn't include the cost of jails, it doesn't include prisons, the lawyers, the judges, the courts. All that stuff isn't included in this expense. So the money we're putting into this is incredible. What we can do, this is probably the one point that I'd like every single person in the country to know, because if everyone just did just one thing, it would make a huge difference in what's happening. But you know, we have a lot of people that are addicted right now, or we wouldn't have 300 people dying every day. But we have a lot of young people that are coming up into that age where they could start something like this. And that's the people that we could really make a difference on. But talk early. This, as you know, kids sometimes in 7th and 8th grade aren't exactly going to listen to their parents. But the thing is, they did a survey of over 10,000 high school students that didn't use. The number one reason that was given for not using, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. So if you talk to your kids, start when they're young. I'm already talking to my grandkids, and they're 11 and 7, and explaining to them that people are going to try to talk them into doing stupid things. You know, explaining to them what peer pressure is, because you know you can get talked into something you don't want to do. And I told them, there's 6 guys standing around talking, and one guy says, let's do something stupid, and the rest is kind of ready to go along, but one of them were to say, no, I'm not doing that, it's stupid. Probably the rest would go, yeah, I didn't want to do it either. But you know, we was going to go that way. So peer pressure, they understand peer pressure, and you just keep talking to them that they know, and this is the one thing I really outline in the forum here. But if we just talk to the kids and let them know what we expect, peer pressure, explain peer pressure, and just let them know we're interested. And they recommend open-ended type questions, which are questions that make them talk, not yes or no questions. Make them try to get on their level and deal with them. You're not angry at them, you're not being mean to them. You want to kind of make them feel like they're talking with you. This is what I found on my son when he was using, and it is shocking. Now you look at the arm on the right there, and those are injections from heroin or from meth. A lot of times, they'll use heroin, and that'll slow everything down. That's what it does. It slows everything down. And in the case of an overdose, death, you basically just go to sleep, and everything slows down until your breathing just stops. Your body actually forgets to breathe, and you just die. So what some do, they'll use a little bit of that, and then to appear like they're still functional, they'll put meth in their system. Now they're a little bit robotic, but they're functioning.
Yeah.
But inside their body, it's tearing itself apart from the inside out. They're making a mess. This was one of the things that surprised me the most during my life with my son. It's my youngest son. He probably had my back more than anybody besides maybe my mom ever. And he would never have taken from me. He worked for our family business, and when he was using, he did take money from the company. I found a couple times under his bed sheet bunches of ones and stuff. We have a vending business, so I was real surprised to see that. I didn't think he would ever do that, but in that state of mind, when they need the drug, they aren't the same person. This is my final video, and I'm sorry you can't see this one, but this is a guy, he's with his father. You can see Aaron looks like a healthy kid there. He goes to a party with some friends, and they have a pill party. They call it a pill party. They actually put pills in a bowl, and they take a few of them and just eat them, see what happens. He went to sleep. He was at a friend's house. They tried to wake him up. When they couldn't wake him up, they went and got their mom. They poured ice water on him, couldn't wake him up. Finally, they got scared enough, they called the 911. I can't show you the video, but maybe there's a picture here. I'm sorry, it doesn't. He becomes basic. Oh, did it? Yeah, that's him, and that's the parents talking about how they're lucky, they feel, because their son's still alive. But he's in that vegetative state now for the rest of his time. And like I say, that isn't supposed to strobe like that. Just in this case, it did. So I'm not going to bother going into this part of it because this is just about the naloxone, and we've got a professional that's going to talk to you about that. So you'll have much better information than I will be able to give you. This is the law that made it where you can buy naloxone at any drugstore without a prescription, or get it free from Fred, like that. And those boxes you got are very expensive, so appreciate them because they put some money into that. And the last thing I've got here is, I just want to go back to the, let's see if I can get to the page. I'm sorry, I guess. Well, it says don't wait for rock bottom. You know, in most cases now we say that someone can't get help till they want help. And that is a problem. The only problem with something like this is you're talking about the possibility of being poisoned also. So you kind of got to try to confront the person while they're still, you know, as early as you can. You can't wait for them to hit the bottom because it's possible, very likely in the case of these kind of drugs, death. And then there's nothing left to do. But if you're ever in this situation, you do need to get help. And again, the program I got there, the form does show how to get the PAL group and some of these different things. But I'll leave you just one thought, if you can. Anytime you get an opportunity to tell someone to talk to their kids about these pills, this fentanyl, I'm telling you right now, this has changed. This is not the same program we did a year ago. This fentanyl increase now is actually cheaper for them. They don't need this big, huge field of poppy plants. They can get, I think, a kilogram of fentanyl will make something like $6 or $7 million worth of finished product, and they don't need anything but a place to put it together. And it's extremely dangerous. I know last year in Arizona, they stopped enough fentanyl at the border to kill everybody in America 7 times over. That doesn't mean how much made it through. And the other thing about it is fentanyl now is able to be purchased. You can actually buy you can't buy fentanyl, but you can buy the stuff to make fentanyl on Amazon or Alibaba and get it delivered to your house, and then you can make your own pills. And then if you want, you can go onto Amazon and you can buy a stamp that says Percocet or Tylenol or Xanax, whatever stamp you want. You can make your own pills and they look just the same. So when you're buying them on the street, you don't know if you're buying one that was made by a pharmacist in a lab or if it was made by anybody else in their garage. And you take that pill and it might be the last thing you do. Yes?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So are you saying, like, if being my friend, we want to go get some Xannies, we think we're buying Xannies, but you've actually fabricated a drug and stamped it?
We could. If you get it at if you get it at a pharmacy, it won't be like that.
I'm talking about street.
If you get it on the street, it's very possible you're gonna, you know.
I might get hooked on that and come back and be those Xannies you had, and actuality, it could just be something fentanyl.
You might not even get hooked on it. You might die from it. It's probably better than a 40% chance that pill is fatal. So you get it on the street, and it's one that was made, and they can look very real. I mean, that one picture, I should have stopped and showed it, but the pills look the same. Half were legal and half were made up. And you can't tell the difference by looking at them. And it's police card too. Yeah, well, they make it look very real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like the M30s all say M30, right? Yeah, these pills are all, I say that what's that? Anyway, I'm going to sign off so we can move on. Thank you.